The Theory of Moral Sentiments by Adam Smith. Part 2 of Merit and Demerit, or of the Objects of Reward and Punishment, consisting of 3 sections. Section 3 of the Influence of Fortune upon the Sentiments of Mankind, with regard to the Merit or Demerit of Actions. Chapter 3 of the Final Cause of this Irregularity of Sentiments. Such is the effect of the good or bad consequences of actions upon the sentiments both of the person who performs them and of others, and thus fortune, which governs the world, has some influence where we should be least willing to allow her any, and directs in some measure the sentiments of mankind with regard to the character and conduct both of themselves and others. That the world judges by the event, and not by the design, has been in all ages the complaint, and is the great discouragement of virtue. Everybody agrees to the general maxim that as the event does not depend on the agent, it ought to have no influence upon our sentiments with regard to the merit or propriety of his conduct. But when we come to particulars, we find that our sentiments are scarce in any one instance exactly conformable to what this equitable maxim would direct. The happy or unprosperous event of any action is not only apt to give us good or bad opinion of the prudence with which it was conducted, but almost always too animates our gratitude or resentment, our sense of the merit or demerit of the design. Nature, however, when she implanted the seeds of this irregularity in the human breast, seems, as upon all other occasions, to have intended the happiness and perfection of the species. If the hurtfulness of the design, if the malevolence of the affection, were alone the causes which excited our resentment, we should feel all the furies of that passion against any person in whose breast we suspected or believed such designs or affections were harbored. Though they had never broke out into any action, sentiments, thoughts, intentions would become the objects of punishment, and if the indignation of mankind run as high against them as against actions, if the baseness of thought, which had given birth to no action, seemed in the eyes of the world as much to call aloud for vengeance as the baseness of the action, every court of judicature would become the real inquisition. There would be no safety for the most innocent and circumspect conduct. Bad wishes, bad views, bad designs might still be suspected, and while these excited the same indignation with bad conduct, while bad intentions were as much resented as bad actions, they would equally expose the person to punishment and resentment. Actions, therefore, which either produce actual evil or attempt to produce it, and thereby puts us in the immediate fear of it, are by the author of nature rendered the only proper and approved objects of human punishment and resentment. Sentiments, designs, affections, though it is from these that according to cool reason human actions derive their whole merit or demerit, are placed by the great Judge of hearts beyond the limits of every human jurisdiction, and are reserved for the cognizance of his own unerring tribunal. That necessary rule of justice, therefore, that men in this life are liable to punishment for their actions only, not for their designs and intentions, is founded upon this salutary and useful irregularity in human sentiments concerning merit or demerit, which at first sight appears so absurd and unaccountable, but every part of nature, when attentively surveyed, equally demonstrates the providential care of its author, and we may admire the wisdom of goodness of God even in the weakness and folly of man. Nor is that irregularity of sentiments altogether without its utility, by which the merit of an unsuccessful attempt to serve, and much more that of mere good inclinations and kind wishes, appears to be imperfect. Man was made for action, and to promote by the exertion of his faculties such changes in the external circumstances both of himself and others, as may seem most favorable to the happiness of all. He must not be satisfied with the indolent benevolence, nor fancy himself with the friend of mankind, because in his heart he wishes well to the prosperity of the world, that he may call forth the whole vigor of his soul, and strain every nerve, in order to produce those ends which it is the purpose of his being to advance. Nature has taught him that neither himself nor mankind can be fully satisfied with his conduct, nor bestow upon it the full measure of applause, unless he actually produce them. He is made to know that the praise of good intentions, without the merit of good offices, will be of little avail to excite either the loudest acclamations of the world, or even the highest degree of self-applause. The man who has performed no single action of importance, but whose whole conversation and deportment expresses the justest and noblest and the most generous sentiments, can be entitled to demand no very high reward, even though his inutility should be owing to nothing but the want of an opportunity to serve. We can still refuse it him without blame. We can still ask him, "What have you done? What actual service can you produce, to entitle you to such a great recompense? We can esteem you, and love you, but we owe you nothing." To reward, indeed, that latent virtue which has been useless only for want of an opportunity to serve, to bestow upon it those honors and preferments, which, though in some measure it may be said to deserve them, it could not, with propriety, have insisted upon, is the effect of the most divine benevolence. To punish, on the contrary, for the affections of the heart only, where no crime has been committed, is the most insolent and barbarous tyranny. The benevolent affections seem to deserve most praise, when they do not wait till it becomes almost a crime for them not to exert themselves. The malevolent, on the contrary, can scarce be too tardy, too slow, or deliberate. It is even of considerable importance that the evil which is done without design should be regarded as a misfortune to the doer as well as the sufferer. Man is thereby taught to reverence the happiness of his brethren, to tremble lest he should, even unknowingly, to do anything that can hurt them, and to dread that animal resentment which he feels is ready to burst out against him, if he should, without design, be the unhappy instrument of their calamity, as in the ancient heathen religion, that holy ground which has been consecrated to some god was not to be trod upon but upon solemn and necessary occasions, and the man who had even ignorantly violated it became piacular from that moment, and until proper atonement should be made, incurred the vengeance of that powerful and invisible being to whom it had been set apart. So, by the wisdom of nature, the happiness of every innocent man is, in the same manner, rendered holy, consecrated, and hedged around against the approach of every other man, not to be wantonly trod upon, not even to be, in any respect, ignorantly and involuntarily violated, without requiring some expiation, some atonement in proportion to the greatness of such undesigned violation. A man of humanity, who accidentally and without the smallest degree of blamable negligence has been the cause of the death of another man, feels himself piacular, though not guilty. During his whole life he considers this accident as one of the greatest misfortunes that could have befallen him. If the family of the slain is poor, and he himself in tolerable circumstances, he immediately takes them under his protection, and without any other merit, thinks them entitled to every degree of favor and kindness. If they are in better circumstances, he endeavors by every submission, by every expression of sorrow, by rendering them every good office which he can devise or they accept of, to atone for what has happened, and to propitiate as much as possible their perhaps natural, though no doubt most unjust resentment, for the great though involuntary offence which he has given them. The distress which an innocent person feels, who, by some accident, has been led to do something which, if it had been done with knowledge and design, would have justly exposed him to the deepest reproach, has given occasion to some of the finest and most interesting scenes both of the ancient and the modern drama. It is this fallacious sense of guilt, if I may call it so, which constitutes the whole distress of Oedipus and Jocasta upon the Greek, of Monimia and Isabella upon the English theatre. They are all of them in the highest degree piacular, though not one of them is in the smallest degree guilty. Notwithstanding, however, all these seeming irregularities of sentiment, if man should unfortunately either give occasion to those evils which he did not intend, or fail in producing that good which he intended, nature has not left his innocence altogether without consolation, nor his virtue altogether without reward. He then calls his assistance that just and equitable maxim, that those events which do not depend upon our conduct ought not to diminish his esteem that is due to us. He summons up his whole magnanimity and firmness of soul, and strives to regard himself not in the light in which he at present appears, but in that in which he ought to appear, in which he would have appeared had his generous designs been crowned with success, and in which he would still appear, notwithstanding their miscarriage, if the sentiments of mankind were either altogether candid and equitable, or even perfectly consistent with themselves. The more candid and humane part of mankind entirely go along with the effort which he thus makes to support himself in his own opinion. They exert their whole generosity and greatness of mind to correct in themselves this irregularity of human nature, and to endeavor to regard his unfortunate magnanimity in the same light, in which, had it been successful, they would without any such generous exertion have naturally been disposed to consider it.